So, whilst we're out in nature, we've got access to blue spaces, including rivers, lakes and oceans. By being near, in, on or around water, we can cultivate what Dr. Wallace J. Nichols terms our blue mind. Blue mind being defined as a mildly meditative state, characterised by calm, peacefulness, unity and a sense of general happiness and satisfaction with life in the moment. Dr. Nichols explains that being with water is more than a pretty sight. He covers the technicalities of the research on the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, evolutionary biology, neuroimaging and neuron functioning, which shows why humans have an innate value for being near, in, on or around water.
So, neurologically, neurochemically, physiologically, we respond to water in a very special way that is really worth understanding.
When we are with a body of water, we're provided with a soft focus. The field of vision is not overstimulating, rather it is simplified. The same goes auditorily. There are no harsh noises, i.e. phone calls, sirens or traffic. Rather, we hear the soft, gentle sounds of flowing rivers or the rhythmic tides lapping against the shore. So these gentle sounds and simplified field of vision allows the heart rate to slow down, as subconsciously we feel that we're in a safe environment. This in turn activates the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for regulating the bodily functions to induce relaxation, as well as a flood of neurochemicals in the brain, inducing feelings of wellness. In contrast to the calming blue spaces the modern world demands in urban environments, people are subject to a constant influx of information and stimuli from the environment, which the brain is constantly having to process and filter. Over time, these constant stresses and information overload induces a fear-based, anxious mind, which is constantly on alert, attending to the next thing or task. It becomes an issue when we are chronically in this active state, always on. It causes mental fatigue, chronic stress, monkey mind, leading to the symptoms of anxiety, depression, autoimmune diseases, a loss of sex drive and an over-reliance on alcohol and drugs. This is in a society of wealth and abundance, yet people are still suffering due to a lack of balance. So we need time to quiet the senses and the mind. Being around water allows us to do this effectively. It allows us to let go of stress and restore to a default psychology and physiology, a calmer baseline, an undisturbed state of being. So there are numerous studies which report the quantitative data regarding people's quality of life and subjective well-being, which is shown to be enhanced by being in close proximity to water. Again, rather than turning to or relying on pharmaceuticals, like forest bathing, we should consider the prescription of green and blue spaces to disconnect from the constant stimulation of the modern world and instead reconnect to nature, by ourselves and with others. So when we quiet and calm the mind from the senses in this way, the mind is freed up and given bandwidth from which new thoughts and creativity are allowed in, as we're not so consumed by our surface level human problems, which can feel to be so overly present and consumers. Instead, we can think beyond ourselves, and is why many famous creatives have found being around water so conducive to this creative process. So, whilst we're out in the wild, we can actually get in the water. So this could be in rivers, lakes or the ocean, which can provide us with a stimulus for cold exposure. Just a safety warning here. Cold shock can be fatal, so please refer to this article by the RNLI on how to safely practice open water swimming and how to acclimatise to the cold.
If you do have any cardiovascular problems, it's a good idea to consult your doctor before swimming in cold water.
There is also the consideration of water quality. So there are apps and information online, such as the Safer Seas and River Service, to check specific spots and their suitability for bathing. However, cold exposure can provide us with a range of psychological and physiological benefits, and is partly why it has become so popular. The neuroscientist Andrew Huberman covers the research on cold exposure well.
Deliberate cold exposure has a very powerful effect on the release of dopamine in our brain and body. And this is one of the main reasons why people continue to do deliberate cold exposure. Basically, it makes us feel good, and it continues to make us feel good even after we get out of the cold environment. In fact, some people would say they don't feel good in the cold environment. It's all stress for them, but afterwards they feel great.
So dopamine is essentially a feel-good chemical released by the brain. A well-cited study titled Human Physiological Responses to Immersion into Water of Different Temperatures showed that human subjects submerged in water of 14 degrees Celsius displayed a 250% increase in dopamine, which is a significant increase, enough to cause notable changes in the mental state. Furthermore, these increased levels of dopamine were shown to last up to 2 hours following the cold exposure.
And these increases in dopamine are very large and long-lasting. And I do believe that these documented effects in humans explain much of the enhancement of attention and of feelings of well-being and mood that people typically experience after doing deliberate cold exposure.
For context, the increased levels of dopamine evoked from cold exposure were shown to be greater than that of nicotine. But unlike nicotine, where the dopamine is fleeting and short-lasting only while it is being consumed, cold exposure provides prolonged elevated levels of dopamine, which we can carry with us throughout the day. So there are numerous anecdotal examples out there which support the science on cold exposure, with cold exposure being very popular amongst Scandinavian countries.
My name is Gunnar, and we are in warm beach in Iceland, and here I come to go to swim in the sea.
Why do you come down here?
For the buzz, for the high.
Yeah?
Just my skin, my veins, my blood get alive. We are like maybe 10-15 guys. We all stopped drinking for many years, so we are getting our buzz over here. It's giving me the same sensation, the same high that I was looking for. The same, just I'm driving and I'm just I'm going and the cop stops me and I go, "What are you smoking?" "No, I'm just swimming in the sea."
So, as well as dopamine, we also see a significant rise in response to the cold from the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are released as part of the body's flight or fight response.
Now, when we experience a stressor in life, whether or not it's something bad happens in our relationship or something bad happens in the world, and we feel stress, that stress is the consequence of increases in norepinephrine and epinephrine in our brain and body. Very similar, if not identical, to the kinds of increases that come from deliberate cold exposure.
As cold exposure triggers the same stressful responses in our bodies, it can provide a means for us to deliberately expose ourselves to this stressful state of mind.
We can learn to maintain calm while our body is in a state of stress. And that can be immensely useful when encountering stressors in other parts of life.
So there are a number of anecdotal accounts regarding the effectiveness the cold can have as a teacher for dealing with stress, with it now becoming a more mainstream practice.
It's great for managing stress, anxiety, depression, and that's the main benefit for me, is the way that I tackle my anxiety in everyday situations. So getting in the water and initiating that fight or flight response, you need to learn to calm yourself down and make peace in the water, and that's now what I can do outside in my anxious situations, is make comfortable out of uncomfortable situations.
So being able to cultivate this stillness in the mind is a skill which can be learned and developed, in which we use the cold water out in nature to do so. So finally, from an esoteric perspective, getting in the water, out in the wild, it can provide us with a means to connect to nature. It may humble you, evoking feelings of being a part of something much larger than yourself, coming out of the thinking and ruminating mind into a state of present awareness, and just generally putting a lot of our problems into perspective. So seek out water for all the reasons discussed. You will inevitably find yourselves in some beautiful locations. Get back to nature. Thank you.